Okay, so in this video what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut and sew a muslin mock-up because I want to test the shaping in the legs, the crotch depth, and the top of my pants, and do any adjustments to my first draft patterns before we move into doing the waistband, the back yoke, and the pockets. Okay, so far in the video series what I've done is a basic rough draft to get started on the shaping of my pants. So what we've done is we've done some shaping here in the leg. We shortened the crotch distance, and then we also shortened the height of the pants, as well as we did a little bit of some shaping here on the side seams. Now for me, I went ahead and I did a full body muslin mock-up because number one, I want to check my patterns and make any adjustments to it before I start making all these cool little pockets and yokes and everything. Also for me, since I'm shooting the video, I want you to be able to see what we've actually made so far. Alright, so for those of you who are going to do a muslin mock-up at this stage, what you can do is cut out your front and back in muslin with 1/2 inch seam allowance everywhere. But make sure you do the 1 inch seam allowance here at center front, just like if you were doing a mock fly. I also put 1 inch of seam allowance down here at the ankle, because sometimes when your client is trying on jeans, they might actually pull their pants up a little bit higher than normal, and you'll wish you had a little more length down here. After you cut it out muslin, also make sure you transfer all your markings for the knee level, horizontal bounce lines, your grain lines, center front. The next thing you'll want to do is sew up your darts, press your darts towards center front, and then stay stitch the waistline. After that, you could put a basting stitch here at center front on both sides. And then the last thing is to take your two fronts and put them together so you can sew the front crotch curve, making sure that you stop here at the zip stop and leaving the center fronts open. Then over on your ironing board, you'll press all of your darts, and for the wearer's left side of her body, you're going to press the center front under. And this is the same for men's and women's when you're making jeans. Once you've pressed the center front under, you can continue pressing all of the crotch seam allowance. Again, this is all going towards the wearer's left side. Same thing for the back, 1/2 inch seam allowance. You can also do 1/2 inch seam allowance in the crotch curve as well as here at center back. I also have the 1 inch seam allowance down here at the ankles. Also, you'll want to have all your markings for the knee level, horizontal bounce line, the grain lines, and your center back. The first thing you'll do is you'll sew up your back darts and press them towards center back. Do a basting stitch over the waist line on top of the darts. And then you'll put your pants together, both back pieces, and you'll sew up the crotch seam all the way from the inseam up to the waist. And then just like the fronts, you want to press all of your seam allowance towards the wearer's left side. So this is the left side of her body. All the crotch seam allowance is going that direction. For sewing up this mock-up, this is going to replicate sewing denim jeans, so we want to sew it the same way you would sew your jeans in Final Fabric. What we're going to do is here's the fronts and here's the backs. We're going to sew these with the inseams next. We're going to sew the front inseams onto the back inseams. And we're going to go from the ankle all the way to the crotch and all the way back to the other ankle. But one thing I want you to remember is we want all of these seam allowances to be poking to the outside. So we're going to sew these wrong sides together. So here's my fronts with the wrong sides up. And the seam allowance is pressing here towards the wearer's left side of their body. Here's my back, and this is going to be wrong sides together on top of the fronts. I have these pinned together, wrong sides together. You want to press all of your seam allowance towards the wearer's left side. And now I'm ready to sew this, starting from the ankles. This is the inseam starting from the ankle, going all the way to the crotch seams and all the way back to the ankle again. If this corner right here gets too weird looking, then when you were making the inseam curve right here, you were getting too crazy with your curve, and you need to go back and just mellow it back out. Alright, the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to individually sew the side seams for the right side of the body and the left side of the body. Alright, so here I've sewn up the side seams for the right side of the body and the side seams for the left side of the body. Down here at the ankles, just for about 1 inch, I went ahead and butterfly pressed them open for the inseam and the side seam, and then I put in my stay stitch. Again, I have 1 inch seam allowance, so I put a stay stitch at 1 inch. I did that for both sides. Now you don't have to worry about pressing anything for the side seams or the inseam, because over on the dress form we're going to be pinching this and pinning this and getting some more shaping done. Alright, so let's go see what it looks like on the dress form. Now on these pants in particular, right away I'm noticing it fits really well in her stomach as well as here in the backside. And all of this is from when we did our master slopers. Now I am seeing a little bit of volume still here at the front thigh, and we're going to take care of that a little bit later when we come in and we start to develop our hip style pocket. And also the side seams, it's still a little bit kind of looser than I would want for a jean fit. I know right now it's kind of trending to have like these mom jeans. They're calling them like boyfriend jeans. And this would actually be really close to that fit already. So you have kind of the higher waist, a little bit looser here in the side seams, a little bit looser in the leg. But the fit that I'm going to go for is more of the traditional classic fit, where it's a little bit tighter here, all in your upper thigh area. Let's talk through a few different problems that I'm noticing on mine. At some point I'll come in here and I'll start pinning the shaping that I want, and then I'll also do a little bit of shaping here on the inseam. Keep in mind you don't want to do a lot of crazy curves and tightness here on the inseam or in between the legs, or else you're going to start getting all these weird pulls in the front. Something I am noticing though is here in the back crotch curve area is I'm getting a little bit of some tension down inside of here and a little bit of tension up in this area as well. Now a lot of that comes from when we made the crotch curve 1/4 of an inch shorter. And for me, since I was doing the size 6 pant and I had it fit really snug and cute on my girl, I think taking away that 1/4 inch from the front and the back, or that 1/2 inch from the front and the back, was a little bit too much. It should have just been 1/2 inch total, so 1/4 inch, 1/4 inch. So I'm going to go back to the front and back, and I'm going to add a 1/4 inch back into there. I do like the crotch depth though, especially for jeans. It should be a little bit shorter on there. And I can see there's still that complementary fit here in the back, so it didn't mess it up too much. Now there's also a little bit of tension here, but also my waistband, the top of my waistband I have for the stay stitch right there, is too high. I'm going to have her pants come down much lower than this because I want it to be more of a hip hugger style jean. So once I bring this down, once I turn this into a yoke seam, a lot of this little bit of tension here, it's all going to disappear, so I'm not worried about that. So again, I'll add that 1/4 inch back into the front and back crotch. Another thing I want to do is, The pant leg feels a little bit loose. And to make these jeans, I want a little more of a slim cut to them. So I'm going to get rid of some all along the side seam and also moving down into the knee area. And I'll do this on both sides so I can see how it's affecting the pants all the way across. And at this stage, I can take a little bit away here at the full hip because I can see I have lots of room there. And of course, there's still a little bit of room here as well. And then my last option would be down in the knee area, a little bit down in here, maybe on the inseams. I might just take a little bit away from there also. So I'm going to go ahead and pin this and see what it looks like. Alright, so what I've done so far is I've come in here and I've pinned the side seams all the way down. And then just a little bit here on the inseam as well. And I only went from the knee a little bit up into the thigh, and then above that I left it alone. Now the way I'm pinning this is the way that I've done the pattern making. So from the knees down, remember it's just a straight line with your ruler. So as I'm pinning, I'm just kind of pinning in a straight line and aiming back for the same ankle that I like. As I move up here into her thigh area and her hips area, I'm remembering the shaping from the variform curve. So at first it's like this, coming off of that straight knee and curving outwards. And then as we come up in here, it flips over this way. So if you can see the pins in the video, you can see that I'm still following that same general shaping from before. I'm just taking away some more fabric. It's also really important that you're taking the same amount from both sides, and I try to also pin it in the same locations on both sides. And the reason you're doing this is if you're pulling it too tight, you're going to notice here in the middle of the pants, because you're doing both sides at the same time and you're pulling in the same amount. Obviously, when we do the pattern making, we're just worried about the right side of the body. When I come back here into the back area, I still really love this fit. It kind of fixed this a little bit where it was getting kind of some weird wrinkles. But I still want to add a 1/4 inch to both the front and back tips of the crotch curves. Now when you're doing these pinning and moving stuff around, when you're ready to start seeing what it's going to look like hanging, just hold on to the grain line up above and below and just kind of pull on it. And that gives you what the leg is going to look like when these are just hanging free off of her body. And if it looks really good, you can also take your iron and just kind of steam it, and you can get this fabric to relax back, and then you can really start to see what that silhouette is going to look like. For me, having these, that allowance is sticking out, it doesn't mess me up. I can still see what the shaping is going to be. All right, well, let's do something here with the top of the waist. I want to move it down a little bit. What I'm going to do here is I can see the top of her underwear. So right here in the back. And moving along towards the front. Now here in the front, her underwear kind of V's down a little bit. So eventually we're going to just square it back up with center front. So that would be if her underwear was just really plain Jane, just straight across the front. Now this gives me an idea where, I mean, realistically, I would like to make some pants that are just above that. And so I would ask my client, hey, is that okay? Do you want some low rise kind of hip hugger style? If that's what she wants, then I'm going to know that it's the top of her pants will be just above the top of her underwear. We're still going to have a waistband that drops down 1.25 inches. And you can always take away. So I think what I'll do is I'll start again with a little bit more than I think I want. So I'm just putting some dots on here. Later on, of course, you're going to use your tools and get it all nice and perfect. And if there's a dot that you don't like, you can always put an X on it and then go to either side of it and you can put a new dot. Alright, so what I'm going to do is, since I'm taking away from the side seams and the inseams, I'm shortening the top of the pant. And I can do all those changes here on my muslin. I wanted to add some room back into the crotch, and since I did 1/2 inch seam allowance everywhere and I want to add 1/4, I can also make that change here on the muslin. So I'm going to go ahead and make those changes really quick to this muslin, and then we'll do another fitting. Now, one last thing you'll want to keep in mind is we basically just pinned everything right on top of our dress form or your client. You got to make sure that she can still take these off and it'll slide over her feet. So be sure to leave all these pins in here and then have your client carefully take their pants off. And you'll want some feedback from them. If they feel like it was too hard to take this off, then you know it's going to be even more difficult to put it back on. And you might need to go ahead and just loosen some of it up a little bit. I'm going to do those fixes to the muslin and we'll do a second fitting. Alright, so we're back in here now for a second fitting. Again, all I've done was wherever I was pinning it, I just sewed at the exact same locations. I made sure it was symmetrical on both sides. But I haven't made any adjustments to my paper patterns yet. The front looks great. This is getting nice and snug right here on her thigh, exactly what I wanted. But she still has some room for her tummy and for breathing. And then we're getting a really nice shaping here on the side seams coming down into the knee. A little bit of shaping here on the inside. And what I did was I pressed the seams going towards the back so it's easier to see that silhouette. It looks really good. And then here in the back we totally fixed where there was that weird tension in here because the crotch distance was too short. And I added just a 1/4 inch to both sides, boom, and it's already 10 times better. For some of you, if you're doing plus sizes, mature sizes, or menswear, and you took off 1 inch like we did in the beginning, you probably won't even notice. It just fits fine. But for me, because I was doing this size 6 girl, so she's pretty small already, her master patterns are kind of actually a little bit snug for a pair of trousers. It's just the fit that I liked for her. So when I moved into the jeans, I don't really have to take much off of there. But this looks really good. I can now see the definite jean silhouette, denim jean silhouette. Now, something I did was I threw in a stay stitch here at what I think is going to be the top of the waistband. And then I can compare that to her underwear underneath. Also, if this was a client or you're doing it for yourself, you can move this around, make sure, yes, that's where you like it. Sit down, stand up, walk around, and just see if this kind of moves around a little bit before you make that a final decision. Also, down at the ankles, I left the same 12-inch ankle circumference, so all of the changes I did end up as a straight line back to that original ankle. Now, what I wanted to show you on video was, so I'm saying this is going to be the top of my pants. Right now, this fits really snug on her, but this is all going above that. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut 1/2 inch and take all of this off of here, and I want to see if this all of a sudden gets really loose and floppy. So let's cut this off right now. And keep in mind also, the same as all the other pant videos, when you come and do a fitting, you can only pin it here at center front. So even if you're doing a fitting back to a dress form, don't pin it at the back or the side seam to the dress form, or else you're not going to get the true results. So here I only have it pinned at center front. So now as I've come in here and I cut away above my top edge, so the top edge is going to be this stay stitch right here, so all of the rest of that would just not even be here. Now you can see that since I've done that, it gets a little bit looser. And you have to realize this as a pattern maker, that your darts are holding things snug up at the top. But as the dart starts to disappear, it's releasing the fabric. So if you come down into here and cut away, this is actually going to be looser than it was above. So that's exactly what's happening here. So I want to make sure for the fit that I can get a finger all the way across, but it still fits snug on her. Now you can see when I move around, obviously it'll move up into her smaller waist, but as I slide down, it has a definite stopping point. And where that stopping point is, then now I want to come back and compare that to the top of her underwear. And also just looking at her in general, like where her belly button is, the rest of her. Do these pants look too low now? And realistically, it just depends on the girl. Especially right now in the summertime when it's trending right now to wear jeans with a bikini top. And so you would want some low-cut jeans to show off all of your midriff. So this is kind of cute. I think when I go back to the pattern making, I'll add just a little back to this. Maybe even where that cut edge is will be my final top edge. So this is like another 3/8 above what I was guesstimating on. All right, let's talk through the changes I want to do to these patterns before we move on and start doing pockets as well as the back yoke. Now, the number one most important thing was I felt that the crotch distance got a little bit too short. So the distance from the center front to the center of the crotch and then center back to the middle of the crotch, that distance got a little bit too short. When I was sewing these for the second time, you can see here where I went from my 1/2 inch seam allowance all the way down to just a little tiny 1/4 inch seam allowance. So I was adding back to the crotch distance. And then as we moved along the inseam, I actually took away a whole bunch down here in the knee area, and then I went back to 0 at the ankle because I know I want to keep the ankle at 12 inches. Let's go ahead and start by getting this crotch change. Now it's pretty simple. What I'm going to do is I'm going to flip these over. So here's my front, here's my back. And basically I want to add to the front and add to the back. And then I'll do my new shaping for the inseams. Let's do this to the front one first. Alright, so what I've done is I erased the old inseam and that where the crotch stopped. And then I redrew the crotch level line so I could see it again. I'm going to go ahead and erase some of this crotch curve as well, because I'll probably end up redrawing that. Now originally, this was the new location. And when I was sewing it, I came back and added a 1/4 inch to it. And me personally, I'm still going to add just even a titch more back. So I'm going to put like 3/8 back into here. More like 5/16. And I'll go ahead and mark that in blue. So I'm putting 5/16 back in here. It's just a little more than 3/8. Now when I do this, I have to do the exact same thing to the back. Now that I have that new location, so this blue dot right here, coming back to the blue dot right there, I can come in with my French curve and make sure that they blend nicely. Also, I'm blending to match up with this new center front. Let's take a look here at the changes I did to the inseam. So here's where I brought it out to, I'm adding another 5/16. Then you can see down here at the knee level, I'm taking away a certain amount. And this one is exactly 3/8. So I can move down here to my pattern piece. And from that original seam line, remember we're ignoring all of the seam allowance. And I'm coming back to the original seam line. and I came in a new 3/8. So I'll put my mark there, and I'll erase some of this old inseam. Now from this new 1/8, I'm going to go back to my ankle. Now I could do a straight line all the way from the ankle to the knee, and I'm going to do this lightly because I also want to look at what's going on with the variform curve as I start to blend back up to this crotch distance that I liked. Now if I were to do something like this, you're going to notice this starts to get really pointy and weird. And when you sew that and put it on, it's going to fit and feel weird. So I think what I need to do is the straight line that I'm doing that's going from the ankle to this new location at the knee, I need to continue that straight line further up here into the thigh area. And then my variform curve, I'm going to flip it over because I want a little more straighter of a line as we come up here into the crotch. And I can move this along here. I'm looking at this straight line I have right here, and I can get a nice blend coming back towards the knee. And I'm going to erase all this old information. And now you can see this is my shaping where it's snug and fitted in her knee area, a little bit in her thigh, and then it relaxes as we go across the crotch seams so you don't have a weird point there when you're sewing it. Now I'm going to want to do the exact same thing on the back. So I'm going to want to come in 3/8 and I want to have the same matching curve. When I was up here on the variform measurements, I can see 17.5 was at that crotch curve, and then it came back to match this straight line going to the ankle. So basically I'll just do the same thing to the back. Alright, so now I have the same inseam curve as my front, and it's going back to the original ankle that I had on the back. And again, this is the same crotch distance that I added to the front, 5/16. I added 5/16 here to the back. Now something you're going to want to do is the crotch curve here, it will come down and it'll hit this straight away for a little while. You don't have to make the curve come all the way back to the point. On the back, it usually stops somewhere within an inch of the point. Just keep in mind that if you were doing a tighter, quicker curve for a flat tush scenario, when you do this adjustment, make sure you're keeping the same curve. And then if you're doing a more softer curve for full figures, make sure you're also keeping that softer curve. Now for my girl, there's not a whole lot of change. I see if I come in about 1 inch on the straightaway, there's just a subtle little bit of a change here, but not very big at all. The most important thing is to remember what your client's backside shaping is when you redo this curve so that you're matching what custom fits back to them. Alright, let's come back in here and let's start talking about the shaping for the side seams. Now in the video it might be a little difficult to see, but we have the original blue stitch was the seam that I liked for my first fitting. And then I realized, oh, these pants are a little bit too loose, basically the whole distance, including the high hip area, and down here at the knee as well. If we come back to here where we're using our store-bought pants, we were making sure that we were hitting the hip level here, we had our knee here, the crotch at the crotch level, and then we were aiming for our ankle at 12 inches. And on the curves, I was noticing here at the knee that these pants were a little bit cut into the knee, and I was worried about the fitting because these pants have stretch and my muslin doesn't have stretch. But now I can see that yes, I could have taken some more out of the knee. Up in this area, originally you never want to change this measurement here because you don't want your pants to get too tight. But now that we're doing a more fitted jean fit, we know that we can trim away a little bit of this from both the front and the back. Now when I take a look at the pants here after the fitting, I can see that here at the full hip I came in about 5/16. Yeah, we came in 5/16. And then by the time we got down to the crotch area, we were coming in a full 3/8. And then down here at the knee level, we're coming in 1/2 inch. And then eventually blending back down to the ankle that we like. So I'm going to go ahead and use my tools and get these curves in here now. And then I'll make sure that I'm going all the way back to 0 here at the top of her underwear. So basically what I've done now is I've gone from my ankle up to my new location at the knee. And then I moved up here into the hip area where I have my 2 new blue dots plus back to 0 here at the top of her underwear. And I'm finding the curve that fits this really well. I'm also noticing the curve as it goes all the way up here to the top of her pants, making sure that I'm getting that same curve. And then I came all the way down into this area. And then between those two, I just needed to fill a little bit of a corner right here. So I flip this over. I'm following along the straight line from the ankles. And then I'm blending the curve up into here, and I can erase these extra lines. Now when I made the change here, my original measurement was there, but once I started doing the curve, a nice clean blending curve, I moved off of the point just a little bit, and that's okay. The same thing happened up in the hip area as well. I have my measurement at the full hip, my measurement at the crotch level in blue. But then once I was lining up the curve, I noticed I needed to go just a little bit outside of this and a little bit inside of that one. Because drawing the curve itself, a nice single clean motion, is more important than hitting these dots. And these dots are just estimates anyways. Now that I've made my changes here to the front, I need to do the same thing to the backs. Alright, so I erased my old line and I just transferred the new line here onto my pants for the back. And now I can use my tools to come in here and make it darker. Now at this stage, you should have adjusted your side seam of the front and the back, making sure that it's the exact same curves on both of them. That way when you sew this, there's no twisting going on. And then we made our fitting changes here to the knee at the inseam, and then we also made our adjustments here at the crotch distance. And then again, the inseams are the exact same curve and match perfectly, so there's no twisting. Now all the changes that I've done to the fitting here match back to my muslin mock-up when I did the second fitting when I sewed all the new locations. The last thing I want to do is up here in the waist area, I want to trim away the excess waist and decide exactly the shape that it's going to be. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and tape these darts back together. Alright, so what I've done is I folded up my back darts and my front darts. And then I folded the side seam of the back right here where I think the waistband's going to be. And then I taped it on top of the front. So that way we can see a nice continuous curve all along the waist. Now here's the piece that I cut off. If you recall, the blue stay stitching here is this top of pants right here. And what I can do is I can come over here and I can line up the raw edge with this seam allowance. And I can start figuring out, well, I cut it here, somewhere down in this area, along here. So that's what I had cut off. Also, if you remember, I was making marks below this area where I've cut, and that's where I threw my stay stitching. So realistically, I thought that even below this area here, I was still going to take away even a little bit more. Once I did a fitting back to the dress form, I realized that the cut top edge is already low enough. So I'm going to stick with this cut top edge and not this marking here that I did with the stay stitching. What I can do is I'll just mark it in blue right here at the center back and at the side seam and back here at center front. And first things first, at center front, we need to make sure it's square. Here at the side seams, it should be square for 1/2 inch on both sides of the side seam. And we also want this to be square at center back. Now I can use my tools to start to connect the curves. Now that I darkened in what's going to be the new top of pants, I want to make sure that I don't confuse it with this old top of pants. And what we can do while everything's taped closed, I'm going to go ahead and just cut right along that. Now after you've cut this off, I'm going to go ahead and keep it along with my piece of muslin. So then I have this for reference just in case later on I need to refer back to it. Alright, so now that we've completed doing our muslin mock-up, we did our adjustments to the muslin mock-up, and then I moved on and I did all the adjustments to my first draft patterns. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to move on to the next video where we're going to establish the waistband, the back yoke, and then eventually we'll move into doing the front and back pockets.